Things were tough. After losing my job as a retail manager, it felt like every door in the industry slammed shut right in front of me. Months of job hunting led nowhere. It was Lisa, one of my oldest friends, who finally threw me a lifeline, albeit not the kind I expected. "Tessa, why don't you help out Tom?" she suggested one afternoon as we sipped coffee at my cramped kitchen table. "His place is a mess since his wife passed, and he could use someone to tidy up and maybe look after Jamie, the little one." I needed the cash. Desperation edged out pride, and I agreed. Lisa set up the meeting, and 2 days later, I found myself standing at Tom's door, my stomach in knots. Tom opened the door, a man in his mid-40s, with weary blue eyes and a tentative smile. "You must be Tessa. Lisa told me a lot about you. Come in, don't just stand there." The apartment was larger than I expected, a bit of dust here and there, but it felt like a place sucked dry of life, echoing with a silence that spoke of its missing joy. "Let me show you around," Tom said as he led me through the living room filled with pictures of a woman with a bright smile, his late wife, I assumed. We moved on to the kitchen, which looked like it hadn't seen a proper cleaning in weeks. "I know it's a mess. I'm not around much, work and all. And Jamie, well, he's 9. You can imagine." Tom chuckled dryly, his gaze flicking away. "There is also Mike, my eldest son, but he lives separately." There was an awkward silence before he hastily added, "So, about the job, I guess Lisa told you the basics?" "Yeah, cleaning, cooking a bit, and helping Jamie with his homework?" I confirmed. "That's about it. You'll have free run of the place during the day. I just really need someone to keep things afloat here." I nodded, understanding the weight of his admission. "I can do that, Tom. You can count on me." He showed a small, relieved smile. "Thanks, Tessa. Let's see how it goes, yeah?" Tom introduced me to Jamie that evening. The kid was a mop of untidy hair with curious eyes and a suspicious look as he sized me up from his spot on the living room couch. "You gonna be our new maid?" he asked bluntly, his voice sharp. "I guess you could say that. But I'm also here to help you out with your studies and stuff," I replied, trying to make my tone as friendly as possible. As I left their apartment that day, I felt a mix of emotions swirling within me. This was not the life I had planned, but somehow, it felt like exactly where I needed to be. The early days at Tom's apartment were like walking a tightrope. I kept busy scrubbing, cooking, and learning the ropes of managing a household that wasn't mine. It wasn't long before the place started looking more like a home than a storage unit. Tom seemed appreciative, though he was a man of few words. One Tuesday morning, I was elbow-deep in suds, scrubbing a stubborn stain off a frying pan when Jamie wandered into the kitchen. His hair was even messier than usual, and he had that scowl that seemed glued to his face. "Hey, you missed a spot," he said, pointing at a corner of the floor I hadn't gotten to yet. I rinsed the pan and turned to him, wiping my hands on my apron. "Want to give me a hand?" I asked. He rolled his eyes. "No way, that's your job." "Sure, but wouldn't hurt to help out a bit. Maybe learn something useful." I shot back with a half-smile, hoping to tease a bit of cooperation out of him. Jamie huffed, crossing his arms. "Whatever." That afternoon, I caught him struggling with his math homework. Numbers spread out on the table like they were parts of a puzzle he couldn't put together. I sat down next to him, my fingers tapping the table lightly. "Stuck?" I asked, glancing at the jumble of equations. "It's dumb. I don't get why I gotta learn this crap," he muttered, shoving the workbook away. "Let me show you something," I said, pulling the book back between us. For the next hour, I broke down the problems into steps that even I would have understood back in school. Slowly, Jamie started getting the hang of it, and when he solved the last problem on his own, he couldn't hide a proud grin. As days turned into weeks, I found myself more involved in their lives than I'd originally signed up for. Tom started coming home earlier, sometimes even helping with dinner. One evening, while I was chopping vegetables, he leaned against the counter, watching me work. "You've changed things around here, Tessa. For the better," he said, his voice low and sincere. "More than that. You're making us a family again." The word family hung in the air, heavy, but not unwelcome. I nodded, unsure of what to say, focusing instead on the carrots I was slicing. Tessa, Tom continued, hesitating for a moment. I was thinking, maybe it's time we made this arrangement a bit more permanent. I stopped chopping, my heart skipping a beat. Permanent? Yeah, I mean, if you're up for it. I could use someone like you around, long term. Not just for the cleaning and cooking, but, for everything. The offer caught me off guard. I took a deep breath, considering the weight of his words. I'd like that, Tom. I really would. From that point on, things felt different. Easier, somehow. Jamie started calling me by my first name instead of the maid, and Tom treated me more like a partner than an employee. We settled into a comfortable routine, the three of us, like pieces of a puzzle that had finally found their right place. Tom proposed one chilly evening, Jamie asleep, and his voice was steady, but his hands shook just a bit. Tessa, I don't have much to offer but myself and this family. Will you marry me? He had asked, his eyes hopeful yet scared of rejection. I didn't need a second to think about it. Yes, Tom. Yes, I will. But not everyone was thrilled. When I told my mom, she was less than enthusiastic. He's 14 years older than you, Tessa. And those kids. Are you ready to be a stepmom? Her skepticism was like a bucket of cold water. We love each other, Ma. That's what matters. And Jamie and Mike? They're great kids. I can handle it, I countered, but she wasn't convinced. And so, she came around, showing up at the mayor's office on our wedding day in her best dress, her smile tight but genuine. The ceremony was brief, the mayor reciting the vows with all the enthusiasm of someone who'd done this too many times. But when Tom slipped the ring on my finger, it felt like the world just paused for us. Starting our married life, I transitioned from the hired help to the lady of the house. It felt different waking up and not having to prove my worth through scrubbed floors and spotless counters. I was more than the cleaner now. I was a wife, a stepmom, part of a family. Life felt fuller, richer. But being a stepmom came with its own rulebook, one that nobody handed you, you just had to fumble through it. Jamie, who I'd thought of as my little buddy, suddenly seemed to realize I was in his mom's spot. Why do you always have to tell me what to do? He'd challenge, his little face scrunched up in annoyance. Because I care about you, Jamie. It's part of my job now. I'd explain, trying to keep my tone light, but firm. And then there were the everyday adjustments, the dance of a new marriage. Tom had his ways I hadn't noticed when I was just the housekeeper. Like how he insisted on having dinner at exactly 6, or how the furniture shouldn't be moved even an inch from where Laura had placed it. Tessa, why did you move the couch? He'd ask, his voice more of confusion than anger. Just trying something new, mixing it up a bit, I'd reply, pushing the couch back reluctantly under his watchful eyes. Let's keep it the original way. It's how Laura liked it, he'd say, and that was that. Laura's ghost hovered in the corners, her touch lingering in the arrangement of cushions and photo frames. A few months later, Tom asked me to come to work for the sake of an additional source of income. It was okay, but I was upset by the demanding tone of his voice. I got a job at a store nearby to keep up with cooking and cleaning the house. Family life has not turned out to be as easy as I once imagined it would be. A year into our marriage, I started feeling like a guest in what was supposed to be my home. Tom seemed to have rules that never came up when we were dating, like an invisible playbook I wasn't privy to. It all came to a head one afternoon when I decided to switch out the old rug in the bathroom. It was a simple change, nothing drastic, just a new rug to brighten up the space. But when Tom came home and saw it, you'd think I'd redecorated the whole apartment. What's this? He stood in the bathroom doorway, his brow furrowed as he pointed at the rug. A new rug. The old one was getting moldy, I said, trying to keep my voice light, hoping to head off any drama. Why didn't you ask me? You know how I feel about changing things around here. His tone was sharp, cutting through the air like a knife. I didn't think a rug would be a big deal, Tom. I felt my defenses rising. Well, it is. I want things left the way they were. He was practically glaring at me now, and the intensity caught me off guard. That night at dinner, things went from bad to worse. Tom's younger son, Jamie, had been struggling at school, and somehow that was my fault too. Jamie's grades are slipping. What's going on with his homework? Tom asked, his eyes fixed on me across the table. I've been busy, Tom. I started that job at the store, remember? You wanted me to help out with money. I replied, my voice tight with frustration. So you're just going to let everything else slide? He was accusatory now, his voice raising a notch. I'm doing my best here. I shot back, feeling the weight of his expectations crushing me. It doesn't seem good enough. The house is a mess, and you're not keeping up with Jamie like you used to. Laura would have handled it better. The mention of his late wife was a low blow, and it hit its mark. I was silent, the hurt too deep to respond. The rest of the meal passed in tense silence. The troubles didn't stop at Tom. Jamie, seeing how his father treated me, started pushing boundaries too. One evening, I caught him up late on his computer, way past his bedtime. Jamie, it's late. You need to turn off the computer and go to bed, I said as calmly as I could. You're not my mom. You can't tell me what to do. His voice was loud, challenging. I'm not trying to be your mom, Jamie. But you have school tomorrow, and you need your rest. He scoffed, turning back to his screen. Whatever, Dad, he yelled, calling for backup. Tom came in, his face set in a hard line. Let him be, Tessa. He's fine. But he needs to sleep. It's not good for him to stay up so late. He's my son, I think I know what's best for him. Tom's tone was final, leaving no room for argument. Feeling undermined and disrespected, I retreated, the gap between us growing wider by the day. I started to feel like nothing more than a housekeeper, a nanny, someone who was there to cook and clean and then step out of the way. The day I got a bonus at work should have been a joyous occasion. With the extra money, I did something I hadn't done in a long while. I bought myself a new dress. It was nothing extravagant, just a simple, pretty thing that made me feel good when I tried it on. I was wearing the dress when I got home, a small smile playing on my lips as I imagined Tom's surprise. He noticed all right, but not the way I had hoped. What's that? He asked, his tone harsh as he eyed my new purchase. It's just a dress, Tom. I bought it with my bonus, I said, twirling a little to show it off, trying to lighten the mood. A bonus, huh? And you thought the best thing to spend it on was a dress? His voice rose with each word. I stopped twirling, feeling the happiness drain out of me. I thought it was okay to treat myself. Treat yourself? Tom scoffed. That money could have gone to something we actually needed. Like bills. Or saving up for something important. Before I could respond, Jamie chimed in from the doorway, his voice bitter. Yeah, or maybe a new console that I've been asking for. I looked from Jamie to Tom, my heart sinking. It was my bonus. I just wanted something nice. The room filled with a heavy silence, Tom's eyes cold and unyielding, Jamie's stare accusing. That night, they both started treating me like I was invisible, not a word or a glance in my direction unless absolutely necessary. This silent treatment went on for a week. Meals passed in silence, my attempts at conversation met with cold shoulders and dismissive grunts. It was like I didn't exist in my own home. But life has a way of testing you with more than you think you can handle. A couple of years later, during the pandemic, my mother passed away. It was a sudden and heart-wrenching loss, leaving me to inherit the family house, a large, old structure, along with a significant sum of money. When I told Tom about the inheritance, his eyes lit up in a way that made me uncomfortable. We'll move there, he declared one evening, looking over the property papers. It's bigger, and the school near there is perfect for Jamie. I nodded, too drained from grieving to argue or to ponder his sudden interest in my inheritance. Yes, maybe a new place will give us a fresh start, I said, hoping his intentions were as genuine as my wishes. We'll start packing up this weekend, Tom decided, already making plans. Packing was a slow process, each item a memory, each box a step toward a new life I hoped would be better. As the moving day approached, I found myself observing Tom and Jamie, watching them discuss room arrangements and renovations for the new house. Their enthusiasm was hard to gauge. Was it for the new start or for what the new house represented? That morning, I wasn't feeling great, my head was pounding, and my stomach was in knots. The store manager noticed my pale face and sent me home early, something I was grateful for. I let myself in with my key, expecting the usual silence, but instead, I was met with low, conspiratorial voices drifting from Tom's makeshift office. Instinctively, I pressed myself against the wall by the door, my breath catching in my throat as I listened. "Yeah, Dad, thanks for setting that up. Leaving the apartment to me is a big help," said Mike, Tom's eldest son, his voice a mix of gratitude and scheming. "No problem, Mike. Once we move into Tessa's place, I'll have more than enough. We'll live there a bit, I'll spend her money, and then I'll find a good reason to divorce her. We'll split the assets, easy." Tom's voice was cold, calculated. I felt a chill run down my spine. The pain of the betrayal was sharp, like a knife twisting in my gut. Mike laughed, a harsh sound that filled the room. "Man, your new girlfriend is way hotter than Tessa. Can't wait for you to ditch that stupid chicken." I stood frozen, not wanting to alert them to my presence. After a few moments, I quietly backed away from the door, my mind racing. The initial shock was giving way to a burning, seething anger. I had to act, but I needed to be smart. I left the apartment as silently as I had entered and headed straight to the lawyer's office. The lawyer, Mr. Reynolds, was a sharp-eyed man who listened intently as I laid everything out. "This is more common than you'd think," he said, his voice even. "But you've got a good head on your shoulders, and we'll make sure you come out of this on top." I nodded, feeling a semblance of control returning. "What are the next steps?" I asked. "We file for divorce on grounds of infidelity and deception. Gather any evidence you can. Recordings, documents, anything that shows his intent," Mr. Reynolds advised. "Thank you. I'll get everything ready," I said, standing up. The weight of the legal folder in my hand felt like a shield, something to protect me from the storm ahead. As I walked home, my mind was a whirl of plans and possibilities. When I returned home, Tom was in the kitchen, making dinner as if nothing had happened. Mike had left, and the normalcy of the scene was almost surreal. "Hey, you're back early. Feeling any better?" Tom asked, looking up from the stove. I forced a smile, my heart pounding in my chest. "A bit, yeah. Just tired," I said, keeping my voice light. "That's good. Dinner will be ready soon. Why don't you go lie down for a bit?" he suggested, turning back to his cooking. "Sure, I might just do that," I said, my voice sweet as syrup, but inside, I was steeling myself for the battle ahead. I went to our room, closed the door softly, and sat on the edge of the bed. The next few weeks would define the rest of my life. I wasn't just going to roll over and let Tom take everything from me, not without a fight. The morning of the move felt different. I had everything planned down to the last detail, and Tom had no clue about the storm that was about to hit him. I'd packed my personal belongings quietly over the past few weeks and had them moved to a new place in another city, a fresh start, a new me. This morning, I left the house as usual, a simple handbag in tow, telling Tom I was off to work early. "See you at the new house later," he called out nonchalantly, completely unaware of the bomb about to drop. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Sure, see you there," I lied smoothly, closing the door behind me with a soft click that marked the end of my old life. Meanwhile, Tom and Jamie were supposed to meet the movers at my inherited house and relocate our family there. What Tom didn't know was that there was no family to relocate anymore, and that house wasn't ours to call home any longer. I waited patiently in my new apartment, my heart racing as I pictured the scene unfolding at the old house. At exactly 10 a.m., my phone buzzed, a message from my neighbor who was keeping an eye out. "He's there, looks confused," it read. Tom must have been standing at the door, expecting to walk into his new life. Instead, he was greeted by strangers, the new owners of the house I had sold right from under him. I imagined his face, the confusion morphing into realization and then anger as he processed the betrayal. According to my neighbor, Tom knocked on the door, and a confused couple opened it, introducing themselves. "We just bought this place. Who are you?" they would have asked, just as baffled by the presence of a moving truck full of furniture. The movers, equally perplexed, started asking where to put the boxes, and Tom, flustered and furious, tried to call me. My phone lit up with his number, but I ignored it, sticking to the plan. When no answers came, he had no choice but to return to his apartment, where another surprise awaited him. Mike, his eldest son, had moved in his own furniture, and his fiancée was already unpacking. The apartment was no longer Tom's sanctuary, but a crowded mess of broken plans and shattered expectations. "Get out! This is still my place!" Tom must have roared, the vein in his neck throbbing with rage. "Dad, we gave up the lease on our apartment. We've got nowhere to go," Mike shot back, defiant and desperate. Finally, I picked up the phone after his third, more frantic call. Tom's voice was livid, tinged with a betrayal he thought only he was capable of. "Tessa, what the hell do you think you're doing? Why are you ruining everything?" I took a deep breath, my voice calm and resolute. "I know about everything, Tom. The plans you made with Mike, the girlfriend, your charming little comments. I've sold the house and protected my assets. You won't use me anymore. You can't do this to me. We're married." His voice was a mix of anger and disbelief. "The divorce papers are in your mailbox," I replied firmly. "Consider this me looking out for myself. You'll also find that I will be asking for alimony." I didn't pick up his calls after that. My old phone, the one he knew the number to, would soon be turned off for good. I sat back, a weight lifting off my shoulders. I was free, truly free for the first time in what felt like forever. The courtroom was charged with tension. My ex-husband Tom sat across from me, his face a mask of fury and desperation. He was gunning for half of everything I owned, but I was armed with the truth, and a stellar lawyer. My lawyer, Mr. Reynolds, was a no-nonsense type who had every piece of evidence neatly organized and ready to dismantle Tom's claims. "Your Honor, we have substantial proof of Mr. Wright's infidelity, and we intend to show that his demands for property share are not only baseless but also immoral," he stated confidently as the proceedings began. Tom's lawyer tried to paint a picture of a broken man wronged by his wife's sudden departure, but it fell flat as soon as Mr. Reynolds presented the evidence. Receipts from lavish dinners, hotel bookings for two, and love letters to another woman, every item displayed on the projector screen was another nail in the coffin of Tom's credibility. When it was time for testimonies, a couple of acquaintances from our old neighborhood took the stand. They didn't mince words. "I saw him at the lake with her. They were all over each other like teenagers," one testified, her tone disgusted. Tom's lawyer tried to counter, arguing about the legitimacy and relevance of the evidence, but it was clear the judge wasn't buying it. The atmosphere was thick with Tom's silent rage, I could almost feel it across the room. Finally, the judge delivered her verdict. "Given the evidence of infidelity and deception presented by the plaintiff, I find it impossible to grant any property claims to Mr. Wright. Furthermore, considering the income disparity, Mr. Wright is ordered to pay alimony." Tom's face went from red to white, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. It was a sight I didn't enjoy, but it was justice, plain and simple. His mistress had left him once she realized there was no lavish lifestyle waiting for her, especially when she found out she'd have to share an apartment with his sons and his eldest son's fiancée. "I'm not going to be a free housekeeper," she'd said, echoing the irony of my past with Tom. As for Tom, he ended up exactly where he put himself. His battles with his eldest son over space and responsibilities were the stuff of local gossip. Jamie, the younger one, turned into a defiant teenager, harder to handle every day without a steady maternal influence. Meanwhile, I was building a new life far from that chaos. I took up courses in graphic design, something I'd always had a knack for, but never pursued. The community here was vibrant and supportive, helping me network and establish a small freelance business. I was happy starting over.